Look, thank you very much to the ITAA for the invitation. We really appreciate it. We've increased our stakeholder engagement in the last few years, and we relish the opportunity to be here. And I know a number of you will have been visited by the team, and that's something we're increasing, and I'll speak to you about as well. Some key topics. So I'll talk originally about some key statistics that might be of interest, both about the work in the Commission and the industry. I'll give an update on the 2019 licensing rounds that some of you will be in, May and November rounds. I'll talk about the Package Travel Directive. Of course, we've had that in since March. Consumer protection. I'll touch briefly on our website and on Brexit, of course, as well. We have to have a quick word about that. I know Luke was very good in his presentation earlier on, but I'll mention it briefly. So if I look at the key statistics, number of licensed entities at the moment stands at 208 compared to 231 at the end of 2018. If you compare it back to 2017, we actually had 261 entities, so there's quite a reduction. So the majority of that would be UK entities who have exited the market because of the Travel Directive, and a small few of other European entities. The projected licensable turnover in 2018 was 1.3 billion. I would expect it'll be in around 1.3 billion for the full year in 2019 as well. You might say, why hasn't it reduced? Because of the numbers that have exited the regime. But sales are up. Everybody in the industry, the majority of them seem to be increasing their projections. So business seems to be good. I think you'd agree with that. So there seems to be a cancelling out of the positives and the negatives there to give we'll have the same 1.3 billion by the end of the year. So then in terms of licence fee income, so this is the fees that we receive from yourselves for your licences. You'll see that there's been a reduction, and this obviously is in line with the reduced number of entities that are actually in the scheme. But there's also another factor in there. There are less tour operators, and obviously the tour operator fees are more on a scale of your projected turnover. So because we've more travel agents now, the fees have reduced. And just to put that into perspective, this year we have up to yesterday we had 128,500 in our fees. So that's really it for the year, because everybody has paid their fees for the year, unless we have the odd amendment fee or something like that. But so there's 5 staff. So there's just to put it into context of the money that we have actually to run the section. So that's of interest. So then complaints investigated. We've investigated 10 this year so far, 8 last year. What do we do when we get information on somebody trading illegally? We open a file, look at in some instances what looks to be somebody trading illegally actually isn't in fact, and when we go to investigate it, you're sent on to somebody else who is actually licensed. That can happen at some times. We'll write to them. We'll get them to desist from doing the activity, and we'll chase it up to make sure that they stop what they're doing. Then in some cases we'll bring them on board, and we'll actually get them to apply for a licence or give us security or whatever and come within the scheme. Obviously another alternative is to prosecute. It's very difficult to bring a prosecution, but we have done in the past. We haven't done it in a while. We're currently preparing for one prosecution at the moment. It takes time. In the district court is where the cases are taken, and the maximum fine for that type of activity is €5,000 at the moment. So that has to be taken into account as well. So this year so far we have visited 32 agents, travel agents, tour operators. We aim to visit 50 for the year. So how did we come up with 50? When we set our KPIs a few years ago, we said we wanted to do 20% a year, and we'd get to everybody once every 5 years. So obviously we've less entities now, so we're going to beat that, and we're going to increase that from next year. So you will be seeing us more often. Why do we go out? We want to know how your businesses are doing. We want to know, because all the businesses are so unique in themselves, and I think it's an advantage for you to meet the people you're dealing with in the Commission, and from the Commission's perspective, we get to know about your business. A lot of the conversations we're having this year relate to projected turnover and what's covered and what isn't covered. So, and I'll be talking about that. I'll give a quick update now on the May round. So this year, obviously, we had the directive came into force in March. So from May, that was the first round where it was fully implemented. 102 entities received licences, 14 entities exited the regime, 10 UK, 2 EU and 2 Irish. So then how we measure our service to you guys, when we receive an application, we undertake to respond to you within 7 days and let you know if there's anything missing. You know, what types of issues that we have to go back and revert to you on. Really, it relates to an application not being fully filled out. It generally means that, you know, the common things that are left out would be in relation to possibility of capital injections and borrowings. They're generally the areas that are just left blank and we have to go and revert. Or another common thing would be management account information, just not, I suppose, not reconciling to previous information that we've received. We'd have to query that. But we've gone back within 7 days for 99%, so we're hitting that. Then, once we have a completed application form, we undertake to respond and give you your decision in principle letters within a month. So we did that for all cases in the May round. And then once we receive the bonds, that's the next stage. Once you get your DIP, once we get our bonds in, once we have that and any other outstanding information, we have 2 weeks in order to issue your licence. So we did that for 97% of the cases in the May round. So then if we look to the current round, gone too far. So again, the effective is fully in place. 103 entities have applied. 13 entities exited the regime, 3 UK, 1 EU, 2 non-EU and 7 Irish. Now you kind of wonder why the 7 Irish. That relates to people who have corporate only business have exited the regime, where they've provided us with evidence that they have agreements in place, and we're happy enough that that's the case and they've exited, not the full 7 but the high majority of it. Again, we responded to once we received applications, 99%, DIPs went out 100%, and as of yesterday, close of business yesterday, of the 103 that applied, we'd issued 45 licences. Now that's an improvement on last year, so we're improving our systems. It's partly because we're improving our systems, but partly because there is a move into cash bonds from the industry, and obviously that ties into our previous presentations on the cost of insurance, because obviously the cost of the insurance, the bonds on that side of the house is increasing, so people who can afford it are taking out cash bonds, and at the moment I think about 41% of agents and tour operators have a cash bond, so that's the highest level we've ever had. But that means that because we're not waiting on banks and insurance companies to provide the bonds, and that generally is where the delay is, we can get the licences out faster. This time last year, actually, we had only issued 13% of the licences. Now I know that there were more to be issued, but I still think it's an improvement, but they're the factors behind it. So then, if I move on to the Package Travel Directive, Statutory Instruments 80 and 105 were issued in March. We issued guidance. Following that, we needed to get some legal advice, and we've updated it since as our thinking is developing. We're sending out our updates. So the changes, entities established in Ireland are regulated in Ireland. Entities established in other member states are regulated in those member states. And then entities outside the EU are regulated here for their sales here. So they cannot get a licence, but they have to give us security, and that's the case at the moment. So then if I move on to my next slide, and it's quite a busy slide, and I apologise for that, but I'm trying to get on one page, if I can, the types of turnover that you have, that you need to cover, and your options around it. So if I go through each bullet point at a time, I'll do my best to explain it as best I can. It's quite complex. Why is it complex? We have a suite of pieces of legislation in place in Ireland. So we have the 1982 Act and we have the 95 Act that has been updated. They've both been updated with other pieces of legislation, and obviously the SIs that are transposing the new European Directive. So because we have all of these pieces of legislation, we still have to abide by all of them. So it's not just the new directive, we still have the 82 Act, and therein lies how it's so complex. So so this slide, I've based it really for the audience, so people who are established in Ireland. So if you have flight, it's really travel only. People generally tend to talk of flight only, but it is travel only. Ex-Ireland, so it fits the old description of an overseas travel contract as per the 82 Act. That still needs to be licensed by the Commission. No question, has to be licensed and bonded. The next one, if you're retailing packages, including travel, ex-Ireland again, but it's put together by an organiser, right? So you're just purely retailing a package, but it's still ex-Ireland. That still meets the definition of a travel agency business, and it still needs a licence ex-Ireland under the 82. That's where you're not adding anything else to it, so it's not a dynamic package, it's a package off the shelf, you're purely retailing it. If I move on to the third bullet point there, retailing packages, including travel, so it's not from Ireland, it's from another EU country, put together by an organiser. So for example, a cruise out of Barcelona. No cover is required for this. So that's something new, because it's not from Ireland. So this is one of the changes that have been brought in from the new directive. So what we're asking people here really would be to show us the terms and conditions that would show us that the customer actually knows who the organiser is in the event of an issue. So we're just asking people to show us the terms and conditions of the organiser, and if that's the case, they don't need to bond for it, and we're quite happy with that. So then if we move on to corporate travel packages or linked travel arrangements that are part of a general agreement, again this is new and there's no cover required. And I just have to stress it's packages. So this exclusion for corporate travel has been introduced in the 95 Directive, which relates to packages. So it's corporate packages or linked travel arrangements that are part of a general agreement. So like that, we're asking entities to show us their general agreement sample. You know, we'll pick a sample of the number of agreements you have in place. And it's for business travel. It's where you have an agreement with an entity that you're going to provide that entity with their business travel. So for me coming here today, our organisation we obviously use the government approved agency, but it's a business arrangement. So we contact them, we need flights and accommodation. So I'm looking, if the entity is purchasing really, because if you look at the legislation, if the corporate, if the package is purchased as part of a general agreement. So it's not a sale, if you understand me, it's purchase. So if the entity is approaching you looking for service and you're providing it under a general agreement. So then if I move to the next one, corporate travel only. So it's not a package, so it's flight only generally is the example. Because that still meets the definition under the 82 Act of an overseas travel contract. The 82 Act has not been repealed, it's still here. Because that, even though it's corporate, because it's travel only and not a package, that still needs to be licensed under the 82 Act. So then if I move down, and I appreciate, please bear with me because I know that I'm moving through them quite quickly, but I can take questions on this obviously at the end. So organising packages then ex-Ireland. So if you're organising packages and people are leaving Ireland, it still meets the definition under the 82 Act, but as a package it also meets the definition under the 95 Act. So this is where there's a choice. You can either, for that part of your turnover, you can either licence it under the 82 and bond it with that bond, or you can provide security separately to the Commission for that piece of turnover. Nobody really has done that to date. I think the majority of entities have licensable turnover, so what they're obviously, they're just choosing to put it all together, and that might make sense, but it's up to each individual company. But that's where the choice is, and I think that's where the confusion has lain. Maybe in our draft, in our guidance note, maybe it could have been clearer, but that's where the choice is, and it's purely for packages ex-Ireland. If you're organising packages or LTAs ex-other countries, so So the package begins in another country, doesn't have to be a European country. Full indemnity insurance is required. So under the 95 Act, because it's not ex-Ireland, so it doesn't fall into the 82 Act. 82 Act is still here. In my head, I have to keep repeating this to myself. It's ex-Ireland, overseas travel contract. So these are packages that are not beginning here, they're beginning elsewhere. So the options to cover them are in the 95 Act, and it's full indemnity insurance is what we're accepting for that at the moment. Then, as always, accommodation only, no cover required. And that's still the case, nothing has changed there. And then for non-travel packages, actually I didn't put it on the slide, non-travel packages, we're currently in talks with the Department of Transport as to whose responsibility it is for the bonding of those packages, and we'll update you as soon as we have clarification on that. I'll move on because I see my time is running out. Consumer protection. You'll all be aware that we've been consulting on the bonding and the Travellers Protection Fund account. Stage 1 was completed in 2017. This work was initiated in 2017. You know, it came to the conclusion that the current scheme is no longer effective and that reform is needed. And in order to be, the reform is needed to be able to ensure that we can continue to offer the level of protection needed by consumers. So once that piece of work, the first stage was completed, we decided to hold off on finalising it until we had the statutory instrument for the package travel directive, because any of the options we obviously had to ensure that they would be in line with the legislation. So once we had that in March, we kicked off the second phase of that work, and SEPA were our consultants, and we issued an interim report that they had prepared along with our own consultation paper. We gave an extra bit of time for people to submit their submissions, and we got 15 responses on the 7 options that were being considered. SEPA are currently updating their advice on this piece of work to update their draft report so that they'll issue us a final report. I'm actually expecting that on my email by close of business today. So I haven't seen their final take on it. I would imagine Thomas Cook has had an effect on their deliberations, because apart from anything else, I would imagine Thomas Cook, it may result in even higher insurance costs, so they would have to take that into consideration. But this piece of work, just to put it into context, we're doing it because the Department of Transport have asked us to advise them on 4 questions, and the questions that they asked us to advise them on were the appropriate means to ensure there's sufficient security in place, including bonding levels, the appropriate means to replenish the TPF, implementation plans for the preferred options, and any other matters deemed relevant. So they're the 4 questions that we need to actually, from the information and from the consultancy, devise advice to the Department of Transport. The Department is the responsible body for the policy. The government is responsible for the policy and for writing for the policy choices and for writing the legislation, the primary legislation to underpin it. So new legislation will be required regardless of what way the Department decides to go, but as an interim arrangement, things will stay as they currently are in the last 2 rounds. So things, as I've described on my previous slide, that's how it will stay for the foreseeable future until there's new legislation. Then I just briefly want to talk about insurance, and not to cross over from the previous speakers. Obviously it's a big issue, and obviously it affects the cost of insurance for the bonding as well. I've just set out there the requirements under the legislation as to what type of insurance bodies we can accept, because I kind of had been told previously that there seems to be one-stop shop and only one provider, one broker. So we have been speaking, there's 2 brokers, I've listed them there, T&G and IPP. We've been speaking to other brokers. I know that's not going to fix the problem. Obviously you described very well earlier on, and there's a bigger issue, but you know, I kind of thought we did a little bit of work there, but I don't think it's going to, obviously, the bigger issue that you guys need to get fixed. But we're speaking to other brokers to see if they'll come into the market as well. So then just briefly, if I touch on our website, is very out of date, apologies. It needs to be updated. Most of you will be aware that the Commission is due to be amalgamated with the Irish Aviation Authority. So that's the government plan. There's no point of us spending money, to be quite frank, on a new website until that happens. But I have to update our site. I'm in the process of agreeing the wording for a new site, so I'm hopefully for the travel trade section, that will be over the line in the next few weeks. So what would it look like? It strikes me that there's no consumer section on the travel trade side of the website, but then I don't think consumers particularly are aware, and that's half the problem. But there will be a better search facility, and obviously not only licensed entities will have to be listed on the website, we'll have to be listing people who aren't licensed but who have provided us with security, so the non-EU people and linked travel arrangement providers, they'll all have to be on the website. As I said, we're going to have the new legislation we'll have to go up there. The consumer, there'll be a better search facility, and there will have to be some more information on what the insolvency protection is all about and what kind of protections are in place. I propose to put up a claim section, and instead of kind of firefighting if the company does go out of business and putting up a claim form, to actually have a claim section there that's standard and that people can see at all times on the website with the forms and what the process is. For the trade section, which is really what's there at the moment, I'm proposing of putting, you'll be directed when you go onto the site, depending on where you're established. So you click on I'm established in Ireland, and you go in there and you'll see what the requirements are in that respect. And then the TPF, the Travellers Protection Fund accounts are audited each year by the Controller and Auditor General. We prepare them, but we've never actually put them up, and I'm not sure why. We've never had them on the website. But they're there, just to be transparent. I think they should go up. I think there was one comment in one of the submissions about, if it had been managed, or, so we'll put that up there. So then Brexit, I'll put on to my last slide, because I see I'm out of time. So we had written to everybody last year, reminding you really for any sales that you're doing to ensure that the airlines that are included, that are going to be providing those services, have the actual the traffic, the routes, and that they'll be able to fly what you're selling. And I suppose that still stands really today. Nothing has changed there. You need to still check. There are agreements in place for point to point. So UK flights from UK into Europe and back to the UK seem to be fine, but it's more the charter where there might be a problem. So if you have a UK airline flying into Ireland to pick up kids to go to Lapland, that's an example of where there might be an issue, and you just need to be sure that the airlines that you're contracting with will be able to fly those flights. So then the UK entities selling in Ireland will become non-EU once Brexit happens. So we've written to all of those. So obviously we know who they are because we licensed them up to recently. So we've written and contacted them all, informing them of the requirements in Ireland, and which is to provide us with insolvency protection, which is 100% insurance at the moment for their sales out of Ireland. And we're dealing with those on an individual basis at the moment. That's something we'll have to obviously chase up when Brexit happens. And then the insurance providers, that for actual people who have insurance bonds in place, we've been talking to those to ensure that they actually have contingency things in place for when Brexit happens, and we're happy that they actually have that in place, and we're happy with their plans in those respects, so there shouldn't be an issue there. And thank you. I know there's a lot there, but thank you for your attention, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Josephine. With the delegates' permission, I would push the starting comments we need to tease out everything. If there are questions, put your hand up. I want to ask you very first question. Security, no longer bonded, providing security instead. How will the general public know that somebody, it used to be very clear, it's on your website, these are the travel agents that are bonded, these are the tour operators that are bonded. The people that have disappeared off that list that have provided you with security, how will they know? Or will they be left in a situation where there is the danger they're dealing with an unlicensed trader every time they make a booking with someone who isn't in that list?
Well, currently the majority of people who aren't on the list anymore are UK. So they're all covered under ATAA at the moment and listed on the CAA website.
Right.
So it is, each country, it depends on where you're established now, and that's part of the consumer that we're going to have to put on our website to inform the consumer. If you're buying from a company that isn't established in Ireland, you need to look, and you need to look to that member state.
And have I read this right? ATAA provision is good enough for you. You will actually, if you
yes.
you get the assurance from ATAA.
ATAA assured us.
In a minute, but ATAA is good enough. Once you've an assurance, so that actually gives a carte blanche for all ATAA traders to sell in Ireland once the assurance.
Because the assurance is there from the CAA that Irish passengers are protected currently.
Right, which would have implications for competition in Ireland as well, wouldn't it? For
Absolutely.
You're up against UK competitors.
Yes, but which was always the case, really. They were always competitors,
Exactly,
except they were here.
They need to be licensed with.
Yes.
And if I can get a roving mic to Pete, if he doesn't mind me asking the question, the differences between the systems operating in the UK and in Ireland, it's quite interesting that the dynamic packaging doesn't actually exist in England. Is that fair to say? The travel agents don't compile their own packages? Travel agents don't package themselves. They don't actually go to a hotel and put it all together. Dynamic packaging is fairly big in the Irish market.
Yeah, I think. I think it does. Yeah. So the CAA would do the Flight Plus, and ABTA would do the non-flight.
So CAA would do the Flight Plus.
Yes.
I've heard people like tour operators in Northern Ireland saying that the agents will not be packaging in competition, but it doesn't have an implication there. The questions from the floor, by the way, everybody hands up. The Traveller Protection Fund, we have a situation where it's seriously underfunded, and it's seriously underfunded because of two big collapses. And there is a strong current in the debate that the chances of that happening are pretty minute, and that the remaining members of the trade will be unduly penalised to replenish that fund. It sounds from what you're saying that the debate is not going to be won, that in fact the pendulum is going the other direction a little bit after because of the Thomas Cook situation.
Well, the department have asked us to advise them on replenishing it. So I mean that's where we are. It's true that it has been depleted because of two large collapses, but the package travel directive speaks to 100% consumer protection, and it's very difficult if you're not going to bond to 100%. How do you provide full protection for the consumer when businesses are cyclical? And that's the problem. If you're bonding at X%, regardless of what percent, if it's not 100%, if your forward bookings are very high at particular date and time, and that's when you collapse. If you've nothing there in the background, there's an issue. And throughout Europe, there a lot of countries have a TPF type of situation. And that's how they do it.
Question from this room is, can we afford it? I mean, it's quite penal, and we're paying for the price of a collapse in 2015, I think 2016. It's a huge burden to be dropped onto the formal trade.
I could take that, yes, but the fund was put in place in the 80s. It was a burden then to the tour operators, and it has provided cover for a long time, and effective cover that people have been getting their licenses, and full cover. So it's been an advantage in the background for a long time.
When when tour operators were bigger.
Oh, I understand that.
So we may be tweeting Shane Ross as well as Charlie Flanagan from this room, but it's still been saying his tweet. Aviation, not your beat. Is that fair to say? A lot of people in the room would say we're on not a playing field which is not level, because the Ryanair are effectively a travel agency now, are not subject to the same regulatory regime.
Yes, and people make that point all the time, and it's a good point, and we take it. But current government policy is that they're not bonded, and until that changes, that's the current legislation. And the Commission doesn't write we don't decide the policy, and we don't write the primary legislation, unfortunately. So that's the scheme. We just have to work with what we have, and that's it.
Anybody from the floor before I wrap up this out? We have more out there.
It's just a technical question, really, in relation to the retailing packages ex-European countries.
Yes.
And you mentioned cruises.
Yes.
As not required, you would not require to be bonded if we're selling cruises out of Barcelona, Venice,
yes,
when we're not selling flights.
That's right.
Does the same apply then to Disneyland packages, Geoventures? There's a lot of tour operating product.
It would.
Does.
It would. If you're not, if there's no, if you're just retailing them, and it's out, if you're not flying people out to Disneyland, the same would apply.
Same would apply. So it's not just cruising.
Yeah,
okay.
That was just an example. Yeah.
All right. No, it's just that we.
Now I'm on the spot here, so.
Yeah. We have been negotiating with them, T&G.
Yes.
We sell a lot of cruising without flights, and we have been in a bit of difficulty since that became an issue, and we were looking for outside insurance to cover this.
Yes.
So it's just, we were on to the Commission recently and we were told it was just cruising at the moment.
Yeah.
So
okay, well look at, can I get, I'll just verify that, but yeah.
Okay, because I would need to revise the
Yeah.
information that I'm making.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Accommodation only then isn't required to be.
That's right. That's always been the case.
Okay.
Yeah, that's no change. That's always been the case. Yeah, that's out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Corry.
Josephine,
Hi,
sorry,
Valerie.
just a question about the pure corporate.
Yeah.
If I understood the slide correctly, flight only still comes under licensable turnover,
Ex-Ireland.
ex-Ireland.
Yes.
So the only way that an agent doing pure corporate would come outside of the licensing regime would be if there was absolutely no travel booked by them during the year, which is flight only.
It only comes out of the scheme if it's a package.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a corporate agent who might have a large percentage of their travel booked as flight only, in other words, without any other element such as accommodation,
Yeah.
would therefore, you'd still have to have a license.
If it's ex-Ireland, correct. Yes.
Okay.
And that's because we have the 82 Act still in place.
Yeah.
Do you get? Yeah. That's just it. You know, when you're thinking about this, if you think of the 82 Act, it's ex-Ireland. It's the overseas travel contract. So if you have flight travel only, it absolutely has to be licensed, and it still does apply to corporate because the corporate relates to packages under the new directive, but we still have the old legislation in place that still catches that piece. Yeah.
Sorry, just on that. I presume you can split your business then.
It's up to you.
50% is in, 50% is out.
It's up to you. I suppose once you stay within the law, it's how you configure your business and your sales.
But when you're presenting your figures, you would say...
You can split it. Oh, you can? Yeah.
That would have implications for the level of the bond.
Yeah, it would. And you could make decisions around that. Absolutely.
And is cash bond unusual? Is it historically high to members of the audit?
It's higher now than it has ever been. And that, I'm assuming, is because of the cost of the insurance and the bank bonds. And people.
Lee in the back row there, yes. Mark, sorry.
Hello. I wish I was as young as I Josephine, being a border agent, and there's a few of us here in the room, we sell quite a lot of both package and
Yeah.
So if I'm reading you right, I can exclude both of those turnovers from my licence figures.
If it's corporate packages.
Corporate flight onlys.
No, you can't.
Corporate flight onlys remain as
They
part of the
remain
licence.
that's flight only. It's only corporate packages can be excluded. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, that. You put me on the spot now.
I know that is currently part of the EU.
Yes.
Offered to
If it's part of a general agreement, it could be excluded. Yeah.
part of a general agreement with the customer.
Yes.
And in relation to packages, then, package holidays sold to a tour operator ex Belfast.
No, they need to be. Let me see. I have to. Sorry, I'm going to have to think about that. Yeah. So. Yeah.
The question will have to.
It'll have
take
to.
offline.
Yeah. Can we?
And- And is Paul coming in the question, please?
Can I speak to you after? Yeah. Just.
We
Yeah.
haven't. We'll park the question mark because we can't answer it from the phone here.
Yeah.
And Paul is answering. Okay.
Josephine, just on looking at the need to replenish the Travelers Protection Fund,
Oh, sorry.
what processes have changed in CAR to avoid a situation like that reoccurring?
The processes in CAR are really, we're still working within the same legislation. So at the time, low cost were selling in Ireland, so they needed a license. So that was the legislation in place at the time. They had the bond that they required. Now the information, they had a bond based on projected turnover that was given to us at the time. In effect, it's inconsistent with the number of claims, and we do have queries with the administrators that we're still waiting answers on. But it's important to understand that even if the bond of 4% was based on even a much higher amount, it was at high season, so the bond would still never have been in any way sufficient. I know it might have been a little bit closer, but there still would have been a big gap. So under current the legislation in that respect, for entities here in Ireland, the bonding under the 82 is the same as 4% for a travel agent.
Yeah,
And until the consultation is over and we take that into consideration, there may be changes to the bonding levels, but that will affect the Commission's processes.
But I
because
guess
we'll be
what I'm
bonding
really
differently.
asking is, CAR are looking for us to replenish the TPF. That's going to be by way of a levy or some structure. What's to say that there isn't going to be more instances like low cost unless you change the process? I'm not asking for the legislation changes or anything. These are internal processes within CAR to ensure that people can't provide inaccurate, for want of a very polite word, information to you.
I think the view that Cathy expressed when we put that to her was that the process had failed and it's acknowledged that.
But it could fail again.
The game, can you what you do is you learn, what we do is you learn from the experience and try to prevent it happening again, but to give it
The Commission does a lot more monitoring now. I think everybody in the room complains about the amount of monitoring that we do. So, I mean, that's something that has changed. We get quarterly accounts from everybody. Where we have difficulties or where we have queries about the information being provided, we ask that it's provided by the accountant and not the actual company. So and we've made a number of changes, if that's the type of thing you're talking
That's
about.
probably more what I mean. And just one final point on the TPF. What other solutions to replenish the TPF are you looking at? Because people were talking about insurance or buying an insurance policy with the money that's in the TPF to provide cover.
That's part of the options that were considered, absolutely, and that will come out of this consultation.
And Claire?
Sorry, just a very quick point back to what Mark was saying. For flight only, it's not from Ireland. Where are we with that? Just with they're corporate, but they're flight onlys and they're not from Ireland, not from any part of Ireland.
Flight only, out of somewhere else.
Belfast or London.
Yeah, no, that's out.
Out of the US or out of anywhere else.
That's out.
Out.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, you're talking about the cruises, for example, ex-Barcelona, etc. we currently would have a top-up policy and are bound for that. So are we okay now to go back to Travel General, for example, and say this is no longer required? Or
If
do
you-
we need information from you?
We should have contacted you actually. You know, you should have been on our list for people to contact.
No.
Apologies about that.
Okay.
But once we see the terms and conditions that you have in place and that we can see that the organiser, the consumer knows who the organiser is, we're quite happy for you not to have that top policy in
Great,
place.
so you write to us and we'll send it on to
We
you.
will, if you let me know who you are,
We will, by all
and take a note of it.
Paula from Josephine Travel.
Does.
Thank you.
Sorry, Josephine, when did that change?
Just in the last few weeks, and we issued updated guidance on that we sent out to everybody. But and you know, I had asked the team to contact everybody, so we've slipped up there. Apologies.
So we're happy.
All right.